What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the Cutlass Board Games channel. And once again, we're talking about Blood on the Clocktower. We are going to be having a look at Liaison Fair and how to run some Teensyvilles and what it's like in building setups for Teensyvilles. This was actually suggested by you in the comment section, so shout out for that. This was a great idea. A lot of the stuff that I do when it comes to talking about games is normally skewed towards, like bigger setups, 10 players, 11 players. And Teensyville plays very differently. Teensyville, you know that the game is very, very short. And the stakes are really, really low. So you can do huge, ridiculous things. You can be incredibly punishing to players in a way that would be very different in a bigger game. For example, if something horrible happens and a player is stuck in a shitty scenario, in a Teensyville game, they're like, in 10 minutes, it goes away and I stop suffering. In a big game, you're like, well, in an hour and a half, it goes away and I stop suffering. And thinking about things like that means that you can be more relaxed and more silly when it comes to some of the choices that you can make. But having a look at the script here, we've got the balloonist, the savant, the Amnesiac, Fisherman, artist, Cannibal, mutant, lunatic, outsiders, widow, goblin, minions, and the Leviathan. Let's start with the Leviathan, because it's our only demon. But basically, if more than one good player is executed, evil wins. All players know you're in play. After day 5, evil wins. So the Leviathan doesn't kill at night, and the Leviathan gives you basically like a time window, and then the game ends. The Leviathan is possibly the greatest Teensyville demon because it means that you will have a slightly longer game for the fewer players. It's usually a great go-to pick when you have players that prefer a crunchier, bigger game, but we didn't quite get to 7. You pick a Leviathan script. That's kind of my read for it. The way that you kind of run the Leviathan normally is that you need to continually publicly announce how close they are to the Leviathan's win condition, basically. Often this is done, and you can see a lot of other storytellers have done this by using a water level analogy, where it's like it starts around your ankles and then now it's up above your knees and it's climbing slowly, right? Because every player needs to know the Leviathan is in place and doing something that's kind of engaging and thematic to keep players aware that Levi is the thing they have to worry about. And then after day 5, Levi wins, or if 2 good players are executed, evil wins. In actually running the demon, there's nothing you really need to do beyond the public announcements, and then, obviously if the game ends. But the way that the players play are very different because there's no pressure to hide to not necessarily be a demon target. But let's have a look at minions. I think doing this in reverse order might be good. Goblin is one of those great chaotic fun characters where the Goblin doesn't really do anything actively. Like the Goblin doesn't affect the good team. It doesn't remove anything from the good team. What the Goblin does is it makes it harder to convince good players to vote for evil players. Because they're like, can I trust this person as the Goblin? Do I think this player is the demon? So in Liaison Fair, it's probably safe to assume the demon is going to claim to be the Goblin at some point. And also with the Leviathan, you have 2 executions realistically. Unless if you're insanely confident that you executed a minion, you may get an additional execution. But rule of thumb says you'll have 2 executions. And for players claiming to be the Goblin, it can be a little bit awkward. And so I guess that's kind of the power of the Goblin, right? But you as a storyteller don't specifically need to do anything to run the Goblin. The Goblin just goes, hello, yes, I am the Goblin. And then everyone executes them, you go, great, here's win condition, right? So the Goblin and the Leviathan are very easy to run for a storyteller. And then you have the Widow, where first of all, you need to select which player is going to receive the Widow's call. So let's load in the Widow for now. You need to select which character is going to receive the Widow's call, and then the Widow is going to see the whole grimoire and then poison someone. So you can assume that the Widow is going to poison the most useful townsfolk, In the same way that when you balance trouble brewing and you have a spy and an imp, you assume that the imp is going to kill players in order of how useful they are. Normally, like starting at fortune teller and then like maybe undertaker or whatever. A lot of those big old knight asterisk characters. Widow's kind of the same, except it additionally poisons someone before game setup, before they could get their first night info, which is potentially a bit brutal. It really depends on what's on offer. On here, I think really only Fisherman is unlikely to be poisoned. Everything else is likely to be poisoned. But let's load in some townsfolk. So a 6-player game is supposed to have one outsider. I accidentally loaded the Stormcatcher. Let's add a Fabled and add the Sentinel. So I think that the Sentinel should be played in every Teensyville game. I think you should just always have a Sentinel. And why people most often use a Sentinel is to add an outsider. Now here's a hot take. I think you should be more often using the Sentinel to remove an outsider and have more townsfolk, and so that the evil team can still be very powerful and the good team can still, be able to try and solve the game. Especially because the mutant and lunatic are insanely, detrimental potentially, and lunatic Leviathan in particular. We'll get to that in a minute. So I think for the widow, if the widow is your minion of choice, you go -1 outside and you just have full townsfolk. If goblin is your minion of choice, I think it's fine to have like a mutant or a lunatic. I think that's okay. That's our minions. And I'm gonna put whoever ends up in C3 with our knows the widow. And for this scenario, we're gonna say -1 outsider. So we're gonna skip over the outsiders. We're gonna do townsfolk, but let's talk about the outsiders first. They just won't end up in the build. Starting with the lunatic. The lunatic is a tough character generally, mostly because of how players interact with the solving of the character. In Teensyville, it's a bit more easier to convince them that they are the demon, especially with the Leviathan, because the Leviathan doesn't do anything. He just sits there and goes, I'm waiting to win the game. And so the lunatic doesn't need to wake, the lunatic doesn't need to learn anything. They don't learn who their minions are. However, the widow will come to them and talk to them, say, hey, I'm your widow. And so a smart widow that sees a lunatic in the grimoire will go and talk to them and be like, yo, I'm your widow, what's up? That's the other thing you need to consider for game balance in Les Enfers, because the widow will see the grimoire, they will know who their demon is, when ordinarily the evil team do not know each other. And so with the lunatic, you have to assume that they're probably not going to figure out that they are not the demon, unless if they are executed and the game doesn't end. Whereas the opposite, the mutant, now because the mutant becomes confirmed good, but specifically takes up an execution from the Leviathan, one of your two, the mutant execution can be kind of detrimental. My read of the situation is the mutant execution should never end the game. So if a good player has already been executed, you should not execute the mutant. If a good player, I think just maybe if any player has not been executed, then it's okay to execute the mutant. And if they're like super obvious about breaking madness, you execute them. If they've not made any attempts to bluff any other character and people guess that they are the mutant, maybe execute them. And because of Teensyville, I think you can be a bit more punishing, but I think if they just say nothing, you can't really go, well, that guy didn't claim to be a townsfolk, he must be an outsider. But if players guess that they are the mutant because they haven't claimed, townsfolk, then I think that's fine. I think that's an okay execution. You weren't sufficiently mad enough that you're not an outsider. People guess that you're an outsider. And again, I would only take that more punishing interpretation of the character because it's a Teensyville, because you know that there's only going to be 25-minute game. It's okay for something like, you got me, maybe I should have bluffed as a character or whatever, which is fine. Now, let's just go top 3, bottom 3, right? Let's just go the balloonist, the savant, the amnesiac, and then the fisherman. We're going to assume that the fisherman knows the widow is in play. I think this is fine. And we're going to talk about widow poisoning and how we're going to go everything running normally and then everything running widow poison, because it should be very different. Starting with the balloonist, I was thinking about this one before. In a Teensyville game, you have less days of information. Normally, Leviathan does give you a little bit of extra time to learn stuff, right? So the balloonist is going to be learning characters that alternate character types. My kind of general advice is showing the balloonist themselves. So you go, you, the balloonist, you learn you. Should almost never be done. I think that it really should be only done if they are poisoned and it's really towards the end of the game. But otherwise, and especially because there's no outsiders in this particular setup, usually it's really easy to use an outsider as the frame for the balloonist. So if you have a lunatic, you go townsfolk, lunatic, townsfolk, or something like that. Townsfolk, lunatic, minion, townsfolk. But I think that maybe the number one piece of advice for the balloonist is that the balloonist must see the demon. At some point, the balloonist must see the demon. And this piece of advice comes from a long time ago with the old balloonist, where the balloonist said you see one character of each of the 4 character types. They've since changed it, and I understand why. But keeping in mind that thing where it's like, okay, I see a demon, I see a minion, I see a townsfolk, I see an outsider, and then when the balloonist is poisoned, what do you do, right? And in any scenario where you don't show the demon, then the balloonist is stuck in this worldview where they have a list of people, one of which must be the demon, and they can't, pick out a target. And Teens was kind of the same. You go, well, okay, I must figure out which of these people I've seen is the demon, because every piece of balloonist information creates a pair, right? Let me throw some numbers down really quick. Let's go. First night we see the savant. Second night we see the Leviathan. Third night we see the Amnesiac. Fourth night we see the Widow. Fifth night we see the Leviathan. And then that's the final day. I think that answer is correct. With this, I think this is fine. First we learn a savant. It's likely for the balloonist to go and talk to the savant. The savant goes, yeah, I'm a townsfolk. Okay. Savant goes, yeah, I'm a savant. Savant goes and talks to the storyteller. Balloonist believes they are the savant. This is fine. Then they learn the demon. They go and talk to the demon, then he goes, well, I'm a townsfolk. And the balloonist goes, okay. And they go and talk to the Amnesiac. And the Amnesiac goes, well, I'm a townsfolk. And they go, okay, I'm the Amnesiac. And they go to the fourth person, the widow, who has possibly the easiest, most convenient bluff. All right. But if Levi is really struggling to find out an open character or something, or Levi doesn't claim early on, like this might really implicate them. So maybe like swapping the order here. So we go 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Savant, townsfolk. Widow, townsfolk that we know is open. Demon. Now, by this time, the demon has definitely talked to the minion, right? Definitely talks to the minion. The widows come up to them and say, hey, look, this is what's up. And they will have an open bluff, like not going to double up with anyone. And then the balloonist sees the Amnesiac, and Amnesiac goes townsfolk, and then goes back and sees Leviathan again. what this tells the balloonist, either that Leviathan is the demon or the Leviathan is someone that you can super duper trust. And then the Amnesiac is the person that you should be trying to kill, right? It's kind of a 50-50 based on the player's interpretation when you show somebody twice. You're like, this person is important, but it doesn't tell you how, right? And when you're bouncing between a townsfolk and the demon, I try and figure that out. You could do the same for the widow, like bounce off the widow in the same way. And I think showing a player more than once is helpful. But going back to the original setup, basically every single second piece of balloonist information creates a pair, right? So we go, okay, savant widow, not the same character type. Widow Leviathan, not the same character type. Leviathan Amnesiac, not the same character type. With the 3 and the 4, right? Now when we go from 4 to 5 and we show Leviathan Amnesiac, we're going, the Leviathan and Amnesiac are not the same character type for the second time. Which is, yeah, look, this is the one that you care about and you're interested in. And so seeing it like that, you go, okay, you would learn two players that don't share a character type, except for the first night we learn one character. Is another good way of looking at how the balloonist works. And I think this is fine. Basically, you want to show the evil team a lot and help the balloonist, clue some stuff out and how much they trust some people to be townsfolk or not. With the widow, the evil team's going to be pretty good looking townsfolk, so it's afternoon nap time. Had a big day. Okay, so after the balloonist, let's do the savant. So the savant, and again, we'll do widow poisoning afterwards. The savant's going to get a bunch of different pieces of information. They should get 5 days. So you need to think of 10 statements, all right? 5 of which are going to be true, 5 of which are going to be false. And if they're poison, it's going to be 10 false. And so with this setup, let's just give a couple of examples. Let's say, and we could bounce off existing things, right? We can do stuff like the fisherman hasn't asked their question yet, hasn't asked for their advice yet. We can do stuff like the balloonist has not seen a townsfolk yet, or the balloonist has seen the minion. And then that cuts the balloonist info in half and goes, okay, amongst these people there is a minion. How does this pattern now work, right? And the more you slot the savant information to pair up with stuff that exists is really helpful. You could give the savant information to help the amnesiac solve their ability. You could give the savant information, similarly to the Ask the Fisherman. You give savant information that works with the cannibal, like the cannibal is poisoned, or the cannibal's ability did this. The cannibal used the once per game ability, or the cannibal was supposed to talk to the storyteller today and didn't, or something like that. The implicating that the demon is a lunatic with savant information will be really funny also. And don't forget, because this is a Teensyville, you can be really out there and really crazy and kind of game solvy. And then conversely, if the savant is poisoned, you can just give them really detrimental information. You should never give the savant information where you go, oh yeah, my information is fucked up. You should just give them stuff that is always possible. Both the true and false should feel possible in the game state, and they have to figure it out. Both false ones will eventually be more figure-outable because it'll be harder for you to find things that haven't happened. But the more nebulous you can make stuff, the more hidden you can make stuff. Goblin was nominated, or has been nominated this game. The wider time period for something to have been true or false is going to make it easier on you to find something that works. Which I think is fine. Interacting with a lot of characters. Using a really common one is using existing character abilities, like a chef would have gotten this, that kind of stuff. A clockmaker would have gotten this. All of those things I think are fine. Saying contradictory ones is also really interesting, especially if you have false info or something. I mean, it's not the Vortox, right? The Widows poison someone. You can give them true information sometimes. You could go true information. Creating paradoxical information is a funnier and more interesting solve. So if you say the clockmaker should have gotten a 2 on one day, and then on another different day, you go, the chef would have gotten a 1. Then they go, well, these two things can't both exist in tandem. And they have to figure out which of the two things works. Because it could just as easily be either. There's no way for you to figure out unless you identify one of the players. And so thinking about that, I think the Savant is possibly the hardest character to run. But the more you run the game generally, the more you figure out what you're trying to communicate to this player. Just looking at the Grimoire and what you have happening, and it's like, what do I like? The balloonist is struggling to figure out their information. What do I wish I could tell the balloonist that would help them start getting on the right track? The Amnesiac is struggling to figure out their ability. What do I wish I could tell them? You know what I mean? Like, the Amnesiac's ability didn't activate because they didn't nominate someone, you know, as a piece of savant information. And someone goes, I got this thing, and the Amnesiac's like, my ability, I wake up at night and do stuff. And then the savant's like, does that mean that's false? And then the other thing is true? Or the Amnesiac does nominate someone and something does happen. And then someone goes, well, does that mean the other thing is false? And so that it helps you maybe come up with some ideas about what things should be. Next is the Fisherman. The Fisherman advice is something I struggle with a lot. I think Savant is so much easier. With the Fisherman, they always ask me at a time where I'm like, there's nothing that just helps you a little bit. I think anything that I tell you is either useless or too powerful. So I don't know, it's kind of hard. In this one, I think if they ask you on the final day, or after any execution, you could give them a piece of advice that it's like, you have not killed an evil player. You can help, especially in this scenario where the Fisherman knows Widow is in play, you could help them find who has been Widow poisoned. If someone, and again, you can give information based on player behavior and stuff like that. If someone is just absolutely tunneling, they're just sprinting down the wrong fucking worldview, you can give the Fisherman advice that goes, hey, this guy is tunneling on the wrong thing. Maybe forget about this player for now, or you can trust this player is good, or something like that. You could just identify the Widow to them. You could say the Goblin is not in play, which could be really helpful because the Goblin is powerful not in play and in play, right? The Widow is only powerful not in play if an evil player claims to have seen the Widow ping. And so the Fisherman might get executed and ask their advice just before they die to prove that they're not an evil player bluffing. And so I think in a Teensyville game, running the Fisherman, you give information that's as powerful right up into this is the demon, right? But maybe, honestly, maybe if they are Widow poisoned, because I think it's not a great target for Widow poisoned, but maybe if they are Widow poisoned, you could literally just go, your whole team's fucked, so this guy is the demon. And the Fisherman then has to convince everyone that is the demon, but then they Widow poison it because you've just shown them they're completely the wrong person. Something like that. Like, you have to take a judgment call on what team you think is winning. Normally when you're making judgment calls on what team is winning, you're looking at the 51% to 53%. Like, it's really small. In Teensyville, you can do stuff that's going to bounce it way further away from the center. And then that's kind of, what makes it fun, what makes the low stakes part fun. So you can be okay with making big swings in either direction because it might still come back with something else that happens. And so giving the Fisherman insane advice is probably fine. It just depends on how far away you think the good team is from winning the game. And also, because it's low stakes, if you do something that's crazy and you make a big mistake and the game's lost because you gave too powerful fisherman information or whatever, you're like, seat 1 is the demon, and they're like, oh, okay, I guess we'll kill that guy. And then the fisherman comes to town and goes, hey, I learned that guy's the demon. And everyone's like, really? Like, yeah, let's kill him. I'm like, okay. And the Leviathan's like, well, who am I to disagree? And then the game ends. You're like, well, okay, maybe I shouldn't do that. And then you can take bigger risks, right? Because the players are less likely to be upset by things going wrong. And then you react, you go next game, it's not a big deal. But also it'll teach you balancing quicker in that way. And like it can also kind of translate to bigger games. So you're like, okay, I did this thing. It was way too powerful to win the game. I should reduce it by 50% or whatever. Let's be less crazy about it. Next is the Amnesiac. Now the Amnesiac is just tough to run generally. And I think that the ability that any Amnesiac should have in a Teensyville should be really obvious, and they should be able to solve it by about day 3. In a normal game, it's not a Leviathan. The game kind of ends on day 3, so you need them to figure out like, straight away. And so I like abilities where it's like you start knowing a thing, and it's like explained to you a little bit when it's given to you, or something happens to you and it's really obvious. I had a game where I gave an Amnesiac ability, which was you start knowing that if you get your alive neighbors to agree, your ability will trigger, or something like that. Like you start knowing a little bit of how you're supposed to activate the ability, and then in so doing, you learn what happens or what information you receive, right? So I had an ability which was if your living neighbor agrees, you learn their character, or something like that. Let's just like run through a couple of example abilities that might be fine. You can make one with the first night, like, okay, pick 2 people. You learn if they are the demon or not, right? Like in a regular Teensyville game, where you have like 3 days. You go, okay, pick 2 people, and then you go yes, and you go, what does that mean? And then they never get to wake up again, and they're like, okay, does the people that picked up something to do with character type? You're like, yes, like, okay, he's one of the demon. It's still a 50-50, right? Which I think is fine for Teensyville. Something like changing characters. You could have an Amnesiac snake charmer. You could have an Amnesiac minion charmer. That would be kind of funny. The widow goes, hey, I was the widow. I saw that this person saw the widow's ping. I poisoned this guy, that's why your information is bunk. That guy's the demon. I was picked by the Amnesiac last night, and now I'm the Amnesiac. And they are the widow. Or something, and they come out with a little info. You can make a pseudo farmer. So if you have both the artist and the fisherman in play, and they've used their ability, or they've gotten some information, you could have an Amnesiac ability where it's like spent characters that you select. Now, outsiders or spent characters you select become the Amnesiac and gain your ability or something. Things that build a trust circle. You can have a multiple night watchman, the triple sideways night watchman. Any player that the Amnesiac selects at night learns that they are the Amnesiac. You could have a preacher type Amnesiac where if you pick the goblin learns that their ability has gone away. You could have a I really like the idea of the fake notification. I used to have a character called the Finesse. I mean, I still have the character called the Finesse, but I've changed it a little bit. It no longer performs this function. However, the original text of the Finesse was choose a player, you learn their character, and you dictate what the storyteller tells them tonight. All right, and so there's some pretty crazy shit you can get the storyteller to tell a player. And what ended up being some of the things that happened was the finesse will select a player that's a townsfolk, and then go, okay, I want you to tell them that the Kazali selected them, and they are now this minion. And stuff like that, like a fake notification that their character or something has changed. So we could have something where it's like the Amnesiac picks the Leviathan and something happens that makes the Leviathan think that they are the lunatic, which could be really funny. We could have something that... You could have something where the Amnesiac changes what the Grimoire looks like. The Amnesiac functions like a magician, where the Widow sees the Grimoire and sees the Amnesiac. And if they poison the Amnesiac, they learn that the... Wait, how would that work? The Widow sees the Grimoire and sees the Leviathan as the Amnesiac. And the Amnesiac is Leviathan. And if they poison the Amnesiac, they see the Grimoire again, but those two characters have been swapped and the Leviathan is not poisoned. The Amnesiac is poisoned. So they're not picking a player, they're picking a character, or whatever. And so something goofy like that, like some weird detrimental thing. And you can be kind of free with it. And some things, if they're super powerful, the Amnesiac might never need to know. You know, like if you really fuck up things for the Widow, the Amnesiac doesn't specifically need to know and figure it out. But something great has happened. Or if it's a doing thing, right? If it's a doing thing and it has a profound impact on the game, then it's okay for the Amnesiac to not figure it out, because in theory they've done their job, right? Like if the Amnesiac's ability is just the Widow doesn't do anything, I think you should not do. It doesn't do anything. Then the Amnesiac doesn't necessarily need to figure that out, but its impact is felt already. Conversely, if you think of it this way, your job as a storyteller is to communicate to a player the information they're supposed to receive. If that player is a chef, you see the Grimoire, you go, okay, you're supposed to receive a 1. You wake up the player and go, hello. You as the chef learn that there is 1 pair of evil players. And the chef goes, fantastic, thank you for informing me. And goes back to sleep. With the Amnesiac, you go, hello, 1. And the Amnesiac goes, the fuck does that mean? You go, I don't know. Figure it out, dickhead. And that's not very helpful, right? So you need to try and find ways to communicate information to the Amnesiac without it being nebulous and vague. So doing something like you learn that there is 1 pair of players of this character type, or something is this many steps from something else, or something like that. Giving just a little bit more for them to try and solve things with. I think a cool Amnesiac ability might be choose a character, you learn how many steps away it is from something, and the thing that you have to guess is what character or player is how many steps away from the number that you are learning that matches the character. So if it's like, okay, pick a character, and they go, okay, balloonist, you go, great, you learn that the balloonist is 4 steps away. Or something, a 3-step, 1 step away. And they talk to the neighbors and there's no balloonist. And they're like, well, neither of my neighbors are claiming balloonist. Okay, I'll pick a different character. Pick Fisherman, because one of my neighbors claim Fisherman. And you go, okay, the Fisherman is 2 steps away. And the Amnesiac goes, not from me. Perhaps they are 2 steps away from the demon. And then that implicates, in this specific scenario, that implicates both the Widow and the Leviathan, right? And that still has some puzzle to solve for the Amnesiac. That the Amnesiac starts knowing that steps is the thing that they care about, and they're trying to figure out steps to what, right? Reducing the amount of puzzle that the Amnesiac has to solve for their own ability so that they can solve for great ability. And I think that's generally good advice for even like a big game as well. Making the Amnesiac not a character that dominates the conversation or spends so much time as a puzzle to solve, where they can actually be doing stuff and contributing things. But them figuring out how or what the information means or how to use it needs to be, how that works. And so I don't know how helpful that is, because the Amnesiac is just so nebulous. Hopefully that gives you some ideas to get started. And again, Teensyville is a place where you can go really crazy with the Amnesiac and come up with some goofy shit. If you have some homebrew character ideas, the Amnesiac is a great place to start out and figure that out. and just try and figure out if that is balanced or not, and try and put it together. Try and figure it out. What characters are we missing? We're really only missing the Cannibal and the Artist. The Cannibal and the Artist, I think, require less concern. Cannibal just does the same thing as whatever everyone else is doing. If the Cannibal eats the Amnesiac, you just get to have the worst time. The worst time. Liaison Fair is a little awkward because you only get 2 executions. And so the Cannibal only has an ability once. The Cannibal only has an ability on the final day and the night before the final day. So that thing that you got to show the Cannibal is going to be super fucking helpful. If the Cannibal gets the balloonist ability, just show an evil player. If you think the good team is winning, show a minion. If you think the evil team is winning by a lot, show the demon. If the Cannibal gets the artist ability, they will know to ask a question. If the Cannibal gets the Fisherman ability, they will know to ask for advice. If the Cannibal gets the Amnesiac ability, you have to give them a different Amnesiac ability. That's just like stupidly fucking obvious. You start knowing something happens when you nominate a player. You start knowing something happens when you indicate a player during the day. Something like that. Something really, not the full text, but something to really put the Cannibal as like, okay, I shoot my shot, try and figure out if I can make it happen or not. You start knowing you have an traveler ability, and they can go, well, I'm just going to attempt to activate them all and see what happens. Something like that. Try and figure it out. What else? If they get the savant ability, I think you would just give them like crazy strong info. I think you still wouldn't be like, hello, yes, pigs can fly, and also seat 1 is the demon. I think you would still give 2 things that could, in either case, be true or false. Like, it's not super obvious, but is possibly solvable with other information, or could identify somebody, or in theory, with savant information, you could create binaries that simulate other characters. Like, if you have savant information that goes seat 6 is a townsfolk, seat 2 is a townsfolk, you go, well, only one of those things can be true. So something like that. Something like that actually might not be terrible. On the final day, the Cannibal gains the savant ability and learns either seat 6 is a townsfolk or seat 1 is a townsfolk. It doesn't specifically implicate that they are a demon. It could still be a minion, right? Like, you could have seat 6 and seat 5, and that's just a townsfolk and a minion. But it means that one person is specifically not an outsider and is trusted and can be good and is a townsfolk, and the other player is evil or an outsider. So if seat 1 comes under heat, they go, well, yeah, of course, it's because I'm an outsider. I'm the lunatic. I'm not the demon. And they always have that play. I really like indicating townsfolk specifically, because it means that evil players have a way to step back into something that is not evil. Like, it's because I'm an outsider. It's because I'm actually the mutant. I don't think they're going to execute me on the final day, but look, I'm the mutant. I've been the mutant the whole time. Something like that. Which I think is fine. On this script, the outsiders, I think, exist less for you to punish the good team for team balance, and exist more for the demon to back into as a bluff, as a secondary bluff. And I think it's fine for it to stay like that. But that's kind of laissez-faire. I don't think there's too much else needed to go into it. I could sit here and do hours of how to run the savant, hours of how to run the Amnesiac, and just give like a full list of ideas. Like, maybe that's what I should. Maybe I should just create a custom script, which is just like 40 Amnesiac ideas for abilities, and then we just kind of run through them or something like that. If that sounds interesting, get in the comments, let me know. If you want to hear more about Teensyvilles, you have some Teensyville scripts you're interested in particular, you want me to go look through something like No Go to Joy, you want me to go and look through some of the other things, put suggestions in the comments. Let me know what kind of storyteller things are you struggling with, what kind of storyteller advice are you looking for. Let me know, put it all together. I will put up a playlist on the screen of all of the building better balanced setups videos, which is just kind of like this. It's just kind of, we have a setup, we talk about it, we do storyteller advice. We kind of run through all of this different stuff. So go and check them out because a lot of them are pretty good and will help you just as much as this one, but they might be a bit more specialized. I did a When Should a Librarian Learn a Zero video, which I think was very good. I would like to maybe do some more character specific or situationally specific videos like that. So if you have any suggestions like that, also put those in the comments. I will also just have like a random video up there because we do a lot of different stuff on the channel and maybe you'll find something new and cool to check out. And as always, the subscribe button, because clicking that button helps out the channel a lot and I appreciate it very much. So stick around because tomorrow, the next day, we're doing uploads every single day. There's going to be some more cool Blood on the Clock Tower, Blood on the Clock Tent, Blood on the Clock Tower content for you to check out.